So yeah, yesterday like we went through some of these commands like so in the cheat sheet. So yesterday like what we did is like so we pulled an image like Ubuntu image from the Docker Hub, and then we started this particular Ubuntu image, and then we saw different commands like Docker PS like which actually shows all the running containers, and minus here which shows all the containers including the exited ones or stopped ones. Okay, we also saw some of these commands like Docker pull and then Docker logs and also like Docker run. So let's see like more commands from this sheet like today. Okay. So how many of you have experience with like Nginx server or any web servers like Nginx or HTTPD or any other servers like IAS or something?
I have experience in that.
Okay, so with Nginx, right?
Yes, yes. Nginx and HTTPD, Apache.
Okay. So let's assume that like I don't have like Docker, and then so if I want to run this Nginx server on my local machine, so generally what I do, so I'll go to Google and I'll search for Windows Nginx install. Okay. So you'll get something like this. So you'll be get.
Are you
Are you
sharing
sharing?
your screen, Pavan?
Oh, sorry.
Pavan,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so usually like if I want to install any of these servers, like so what I actually do is like so I go and then download this particular install so the exe for Windows or something like that, and then we generally run it like okay. So it has like so if it is like Ubuntu, so sometimes like we might need to install all the dependencies and all that stuff like okay. So, but with Docker, like, so the advantage, like, with that I see with Docker is like, so it is very easy to create, like, or up and run any of these servers. Like, so for example, like, if I want to start a MongoDB database or whatever, like it is, so we can simply run a single Docker command and we'll be able to make use of that particular software. Like, so from the development point of view, so that is one of the major use case of the Docker. Okay. So for example, like Redis. So if you see like there is no Redis for Windows. So Redis for Windows. So you can see like so this is just like a tweak. Redis is not officially supported on Windows. So however, like if we want to install Redis, like we need to tweak something like so you need to enable WSL2 and all this stuff. But with Docker, like it is just like a small command. Like so, with a single command, like you'll be able to use this Redis software. Like so, in the same way, like there are like multiple softwares, like so which are complex to install or which are actually which don't actually support like multiple operating systems. So in that case, like so, if we have Docker, like it makes our life easy. Like as a developer, like so it makes our life easy, and with single command, like we'll be able to use this particular Redis or any of these softwares. Like, okay. So today, like what we'll see is like, so I'll just start like an Nginx Docker image, and then I'll just post like few pages. Like I'll browse through the default web page, and then I'll also add like few pages on top of it. So before that, like I hope like most of you created an account with this Docker Hub, right?
yes.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So now I wanted to start an Nginx server. So this is the official image for the Nginx. So as most of you are aware, like so Nginx is like a web server which can be used to host like any static web pages or something like that. Okay. So it can also be used for reverse proxy and other purposes. Like so as a load balancer also this can be used. But in this case, like I just want to use this as like a basic web server. So how do I do that? Initially, like I'll pull this particular Docker container, Docker image. So this is the Docker image which I'm pulling. Mm. So Docker images. This is a command to list all the images, and so this is the image like which got downloaded. Okay. So by looking at the documentation itself, like you'll get good understanding, like so where exactly what is actually happening, like so hosting some sample content. Excuse me. Um, so we'll discuss about this minus v option. Uh, but what I understood is like so basically like the HTML content, like the default static pages, or if you want to host a HTML static HTML page, so you're supposed to create a HTML file in this particular folder, like user share, Nginx, and HTML. Like this is the default file, like this is the default folder, like which Nginx uses to serve any HTML pages. Okay. So what I'll try to do is like so I'll just get inside this server container. So first I'll run this Docker run then minus IT. So you can actually see. So this actually started the Nginx container. Okay. So with a single command, like I'm able to start like an Nginx server. So in another PowerShell window, what I'll do is so I'll do like Docker PS to see all those containers which are actually running. So this is the Nginx container which is actually running, right? And so this is the port like which is actually exposed. So since we are aware of these how these web applications actually work, like so any website or any virtual directory like in iOS, so if we want to expose any website, so we are supposed to have a port on which like so this particular website can be accessed. Okay. So by default, like his Nginx is using like 80 port. Okay. So since I started this container, so my assumption is something like this. So once this Nginx server is started, so somehow like I'm supposed to make use, I'm supposed to make use of this particular Nginx container, right? So how can I actually do that? So by default, we can see that like the default HTML page is exposed on the 80 port. Okay. But ideally, like this is not exposed to the outside world. For example, if I see this localhost 80. So I'm not getting any page. The reason behind that is so this port, so it is open inside the container, but this is not being exposed to the outside, like the host machine. So which is my laptop. Okay. So how should I actually do that? So how can I expose a port to the external world? So I'll just stop this container. So for that, like we can use this particular command like docker run minus p. So this is the command like which is actually used to host a specific port on the host machine to the container port. Okay. So minus IT and then minus p is the option. So I want to host like 8081 on my laptop with port 80 on the container. So this got started. So you can actually check it. Docker PS. So now you can actually see the localhost 8081. It is actually pointing to port 80 on the container. So now let me try to execute this. So you can see like this is the default base that Nginx offers, like when we do like basic installation of Nginx. So this is the command like which is used to expose a port that is present on the container to the host machine. Okay. And the command is docker run minus IT and minus p. So this is the command like okay. And this is the host machine like port number. And this is the port number on the container. Okay, so Nginx is by default it is running on port 80 inside the container, and I'm exposing this port 80 to 8081 on my host machine. So what happens like if I try to run the same command again, like so since all we know that like 8081 is occupied, so let's see like what happens if we try to use the same command docker one minus IT minus p. 8081 to 80. And so we got another message saying that like this 8081 port is already allocated. Okay. So whenever like you want to, so that is the reason why like you should actually make sure that this particular port which you are exposing on the host machine, so it is not allocated to some other server or some other items. Okay. So you should make sure that like this port is always free. So that is Docker minus P. So which is used to expose a port on the container to the host machine. So what happens like if I don't want to expose this particular host machine, like a port to the host machine? Okay. So in that case, like, so you can actually get inside this container and then you can actually invoke this port 80 kind of thing. So for example, so if I don't want to expose this port to outside world, so Docker PS, this is my container ID, right? So Docker exec minus IT, and then so so I can simply issue a wget command, wget, and then http localhost port, localhost. By default, it is port 80. So wget is not found. So what I need to do? So since I'm in this Ubuntu container, so I'll install wget. So you can see that like, so this is actually calling this index.html, right? So this is actually working like, so there is a website, but there is no purpose. Like, so if even if you have this port 80 enabled on this particular machine, so there is no use like, so unless like we expose this particular port to the outside world, so you cannot access this from the outside, right? But there is a specific reason like why in most of the cases, like in some of the cases like databases, so we don't actually expose these databases to outside world, so they'll actually communicate between the containers itself. So we'll see that scenario like at a later point of time. So yeah, this morning like Sanjay was asking me a question. So what is the difference between minus P and then minus small p and then minus capital P, these flags? So I'll just show you. Docker run help.
Is it dynamically allocated with
Yeah.
uppercase P,
Uh,
right?
yeah, so minus P is nothing but like, so we need to specify the ports, like, so whatever the port,
Correct.
like we wanted to do that. And then minus capital P, what it does is like, so it exposes to all the ports, like to the random ports. So I'll do something like say, doctor one minus 80 minus capital P. No. So I'll check this. So you can see that like I didn't actually specify any port here, but still it is getting exposed. It is exposed on this 49155 port. Okay, dynamic port. So this is how it is actually working. And how does it know? Like, so to export this port 80, so it is exposing only port 80, right? So how does it actually know? So basically, like, so if the Docker file, like what happens is like there is a command called as like expose. So whenever like we write a Docker file, like so there, if we want to expose any ports, so you can just specify like expose, and we'll see that like in detail at a later point of time. But just to give you an understanding, like so there, like we specify what is the port we wanted to install. Okay. We want to expose. So using that information, so it is actually exposing this to a random port on our host machine. Okay, so any questions?
No, Anna.
Okay, so others like any questions regarding this port?
Yeah, so I mean, it
Hmm.
the flag capital P, does it check the availability of the port as well before allocating it?
Yeah, so it actually checks for the availability of the port. Like it is smart enough.
Mhm.
I just wanted to show you this Docker file, like official Docker file. We might get some information from it. I'm not sure like if I'll be able to show you exactly, but I'm just trying. So you can see like, so I mentioned, right? So this is, I think like this is one of the Docker files by Nginx. So one of the official Docker files. So you can see like, so expose port, expose 80. So it is actually exposing this 80. And also, so if you see, so this is the entry point, like, okay, so this is the shell script, like, which is getting executed once we start the container, okay. So we'll see more about these entry points and commands, like when we deal with these Docker files, okay. For now, like we are clear about this Docker minus P and capital P, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so now we'll see another command, like starting a container in the background. So let's go back to our Ubuntu container. So Docker images. I have my Ubuntu container, right? So this is my Ubuntu container. So usually, like, what is the command that I'm using, like, to start the container, like Docker run Ubuntu container. This is a Docker run, and then the image name. So when I do this, so what is happening behind the scene? It is actually starting, and then it is getting killed because Docker ps minus a. So if you see, like it got started and then it started bash and immediately like, it got exited. Okay. So in that case, like what did I do? So in order to keep that running, so I'm executing this in the interactive mode, Docker run minus IT. And then I'm just saying like bin slash bash. So in this case, like when this is actually running and then I'm also inside this container, like Ubuntu container, right? So if you see Docker PS, so you can see my Ubuntu container and previously like it is bash. So it is open and then it is closed previously. But now I gave this command like slash bin and bash. And since I opened this container in the interactive mode, it is still in the running mode. Okay, this is not stopped. So okay. So now if I do control C, so I'm done with this. So I executed some commands and I see like what is present inside this Ubuntu container. And once I'm done, like I did like control C or exit, like okay. So when you exit out of this container, so you can see like, so this container is no longer running. So this container is no longer running, the Ubuntu container like which I started. So 0f. So that container, so it got stopped. So the lifetime of the container is only present like until and unless like I'm until the point like I'm inside this container. So once I exited this container, so it got automatically killed, right? So in that case, like, but if we want to run this particular container in the background, like, so I wanted to run this container, the Ubuntu container in the background itself. So that is where like we can actually give this option of minus D, Docker run, minus IT is the interactive, and then minus D is Ubuntu. Okay. So that like so I'm starting the container in the interactive mode, but I'm not, so you can see like, so it is not prompting me to enter anything. Like, so I'm not inside this container. So I started this container in the background mode itself. Okay.
Yes.
So that is the reason why, like, even though like I'm on my laptop, so it is running in the background, this particular container. Docker please. No. So this is running in the background. So this is called as detached mode, running a container in the detached mode. So in this case, what is happening? So even though like you started this bash, so it is running in the background. Okay.
Yeah.
Detached. So that is about like -d. So this comes handy like when we run like any of these containers. So for example, like previously, like we were running Nginx, right? Docker run in -P Nginx. Okay. So you can see like so it is actually prompting me. So it is in the interactive mode. Okay. So I cannot actually type any other command like over here, if you see. Okay. So I cannot actually type any command, because like it is actually showing me the logs. So it is showing me the logs of this particular Nginx container. Like it is the standard output which is getting displayed. So if I do like Control C, what happens? So if I do Control C, container, it gets killed. Okay. So this is actually blocking me. So ideally like Control C should work,
Yes,
but not.
yes, correct.
Yeah, it is not actually allowing me.
Yeah, correct. Control C, it will be work.
Yeah, but it is not exiting, like not.
Correct. Sometimes
Yeah,
happen
okay.
like
So this is actually blocking me. Okay, so from entering in any other commands, like okay. So in this case, like what I'm supposed to do, so either like I need to kill this particular container. See, it got killed. Okay, so I'm supposed to kill that particular container, but that is not my intention. So what I want to start an Nginx server, and in the background, like I wanted to process, like I wanted to carry on with my additional work. Okay, so you can see like so once I close that particular PowerShell window, so the container got killed. So in order to avoid that, like this comes handy, like Docker run -p Nginx, and then I'll run it in the detached mode. Okay. So now you can see that.
Shark.
So it is actually running in the background. So if I do like Docker PS, so I'm free to run any commands like now. So you can see like it is running in this 49157.
So on other hand, we can coming out of that particular container with Control P, Control Q. So,
Yeah. So, but in that case, like so in the case of like Nginx, so it is not even like so that is not the command like Control P, Control
correct.
Q. So whenever it is like bash or shell, so
Yes,
in that
it
case,
is
like it
bash
actually
call. For bash
yeah.
call it is.
So for bash, but here like it is actually redirecting me to the standard output of Nginx
Correct.
logs.
Correct. Yeah.
So there is no option to enter this Control P or Control Q. Yeah. So that is where like this -d it comes handy, like running a container in the background mode. So this host name, so it is to assign like any host name or anything like that. So we'll just look at these two commands like at a later point of time. Okay. So now what we are actually doing, Doctor
I had a
is,
question.
yeah, tell me.
So, I mean, when we are using these two flags together on the
Hmm.
dynamic port and the detached mode as well, -p and -d,
Hmm.
can we actually access the web page in the port if we are
Yeah,
running it in detached mode?
yeah. So you can see like this is actually running in the detached mode. My Nginx is still running in the background, detached mode.
Okay.
So it started like a minute ago. And this is the
Okay.
port
So
like
that makes
49157. Right? So this is one. So you're able to access this, right? In the background, like you'll still be able to access it.
Hmm.
So yeah, that is the main advantage of like detached mode. So it runs the container in the background. Okay. So you can see like this is my Nginx file. This is the default HTML file, right? So I'll just get inside this. I'll just show you like from where this particular file is being served. Okay, so in order to see that, like I'm supposed to get inside this container. So apart from this, like I just wanted to remind me. So Tarun, like yesterday, he asked me a question related to attach and then execc. So we'll discuss about that at the end. Okay, again, just remind me. So docker execc -it and then bin/bash. Okay, so this is the root. So ideally, like I don't actually know from where this particular file is actually served or something like that. So you can do a quick Google or something like that, or anyone like who has some idea with Nginx, so they'll easily identify. Like, so this is the base path from which like these HTML files they actually get served. Okay. So either a quick Google or some reading some documentation from the Nginx, so it will give you that idea. So you can see like index.html. This is the file, right? I'll just edit this file, nano index.html. Okay, so actually you see that nano is not actually present. Nano is just like a file editor in Ubuntu. So I'll install that. So nano is just like a notepad editor or something you want to. So nano index. So you can actually see this is the page like which is actually getting served to us, like this index.html page. So it is actually served to us. So for example, like if I make a small change over here in this file, some of these are like Ubuntu commands. So I wanted to see the port number. I see. This is the 4916. Okay, so I think like I edited title. Now. So you can see like I'm able to edit this particular file. So, but what is the cost involved in this? So, in order to edit a small HTML file, so what did I do? So, I had initially like I need to get inside this container, and then after getting inside this container, so I need to install this Nano software on this particular Ubuntu container, and finally, like after installing the Nano, so I edited this particular file. Okay. So do you think like this is actually a feasible solution? So in real time, like in the development environment?
No.
And moreover, like so and another disadvantage with this is like, so when you actually kill this particular container, docker ps docker ps docker stop. Okay. So and I run a new container. If I run a new container, okay. So in this new container, so my changes they'll not be persistent. So I'll not see the same message over here over there. That is because this is a new container and my changes are in another container. Okay. So obviously, like so again, like if you want to change this message, like you need to get inside this container, you need to follow all the hectic process, like install Nano and then so edit the file over there, like in the Nano editor. So it's just like a simple HTML file. But what if we wanted to deploy like hundreds of HTML static HTML pages? So obviously, like you cannot actually get inside this container and make the small minor changes, right? So that is where like this command, like mapping a local directory into the container, this comes handy. Okay. So this is called as like volume mounting. In the command for this is something like this. I'll fill these containers. So you're clear with this problem statement, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'll try to do is like, so I'll just have this file, my HTML files, and these are some of the static files. Okay. So what I'll try to do is, so this is where like the volume comes handy. So I'll start this Nginx container, Docker run. So -v. So I'll give like random port. And then I wanted to mount my specific directory. Like, so I wanted to mount this particular directory -v dollar of pwd. So pwd actually gives you the current working directory. So for example, like, show you. So this actually gives the current path. So this is the path. So pwd slash. So I wanted to mount this particular my HTML folder. So this is the path on my host machine, colon. So you should actually provide the path on this container. Okay. So which folder, like I wanted to share this particular content. So I wanted to share it with this particular folder. That is because, so Nginx by default, it serves all the HTML pages that are present in this particular folder. Okay. So any HTML page that is present in user share Nginx and HTML, so that is served by default. So if you want to share that particular default behavior, so you need to get into this content. You need to change some of these config files related to the Nginx for this in order to change this default location. Okay, but that doesn't come into the scope of this particular session. Right? Yeah. So I'm mounting this PWD. PW is nothing but like C data, personal, my sessions, Docker and Kubernetes, and my HTML folder to this particular folder. Okay. And which image I wanted to run? I want to run this Nginx. I forgot to run this in background detached. So I'll also run it in the detached mode. -t. So now let's see Docker PS. So this is my Nginx container, right? And this is being exposed on 49160. Now let me execute this code. So you can see this. So 99160, I'm able to browse this aa.html. And these are the files that are present in this my HTML. Okay. AABBCC. So another advantage with this volume binding is, so let's say like in the development environment, so we cannot actually copy the contents, like copy these files every time, like make changes on your local machine and then copy it to the container, right? So if you share this volume, so let's say like if I change this particular HTML file. No. So immediately it gets reflected. So cc.html. Okay, so I'm saving this file on my local machine and it is getting reflected on the container. Also, if you see, so let's get inside this container and see like how this file structure actually looks like. So I'll get inside this container, Docker exec minus it and then slash slash. So where am I supposed to look? So I'm supposed to look it in this particular folder. CD ls. So here, like you can actually see all these files, they got copied. Okay. So I'm inside this container, right? Let me add a single file in my host machine. Okay. So I'll add another file. So I'll name it as dd. Okay, dd.html. So you can actually do like ls again, and you'll be seeing this dd.html over here. Okay. Same way, like if I create another file here, like I'm inside this container, right? I'm in this Ubuntu machine. Let's assume this as like a Ubuntu VM or something like that. So I'm inside this Ubuntu container, and let me create a file over here, e.html. Okay. So you'll see the same HTML file even on in our machine. Okay. So if I change something like, or if I add something over here, and now if you do nano e.html, so I don't think so like nano is present, but yeah, so you'll see the same content like over here. No. Okay, so you'll see that content. So that is the main advantage of mounting these volumes, like or mapping your local directory, like which is present on your host machine, with a directory on the container. Okay, so for the development purpose, like this is really useful. Like so, this is the thing like we are supposed to do with the development purpose. Like so, every time like you cannot actually copy these files into the container. And if you want to make any changes, like again, like you make a change on the host machine and then copy back to the container. So that is not feasible, right? So this is the scenario like which comes very handy. So any questions with this? Or you want me to repeat this again? Like, hmm, good Pawan. So you're good to go with this, right? Yeah. Okay. So no questions, right? Okay. So this is the command like which comes handy with this. Like again, like this entry point. So we'll talk about this entry point at a later point. Like so, I wanted to show you. So what is this entry point is actually. So an entry point is nothing but like in the Docker file, like you'll specify the starting point, like whenever the container starts. So which command like it is supposed to execute by default, like when the container starts for the first time, like okay, not for the first time, like whenever the container is starting. So which command it wanted to execute. In the case of like Nginx, so this is the shell script like which is getting executed. So you'll see the shell script like docker entry point.sh, right? So docker entry point. So this is the entry point. So it is again calling like it has like a good amount of code over here. Okay. So whatever the command like we wanted to execute when the container starts, so that will provide it in the Docker file. So if you want to override that particular command, so then you can actually go with this entry point option. So this is more about these commands. So we'll see this host name and then DNS entry. So DNS entry, like you need to have a real-time DNS. So I don't actually have one handy. So we can discuss this at a later point. So now coming back to this tab, like so managing the container. So we saw this command like docker ps. So whenever like you want to list all the running containers, so you like issue like docker ps. So if you want to see all the containers which are in the stop state also, so you'll execute like docker ps minus a. So if you want to remove a container, so for example, so if I want to remove this container, running container, docker rm, and this will throw an error. So that is because like it cannot actually remove it running container. So you need to stop that and then you need to remove that. Docker stop. I stopped it, and then I can remove the container now. So there is another option, like so Docker ps minus, so Docker rm minus f. So this is to remove a container by force. So even if it is in running state, so it will remove that. It will stop it and then remove it. Okay. So that is Docker rm. So this is deleting a running container by force, and Docker container prune. So this is to delete all the stopped containers. So for example, uh, we've removed all the stopped containers. Okay, so these are all the running commands. So it is to remove all the stopped containers, Docker prune. So Docker stop, just now we saw like, so if we want to stop a container, so we can use like Docker stop. And if you want to restart this container, restart the stop container, so you can use like a Docker start command. No. So now we'll see like how we can actually copy a file from source to the target. Okay. So let's again take this Nginx example. Docker one minus capital P in the detached mode. And then, so I want to run this. I want to copy this specific file. Okay, so now this is not volume mounting. So I wanted to copy this file like aa.html onto the container. Okay, so for that, like the command is docker minus cp is the command. So I next I started this container, right? So this is the container which started. So now if I want to copy a file, docker cp. So from the container, this is from container to the source, but from the target, like I just wanted to show it from the host to the container. Okay. CP. It is like CP dollar $pwd, my current working directory, my HTML slash aa.html. So I want to copy this aa.html to, this is the destination I'm supposed to provide, like, okay. So what's the destination? So this is the target file which I wanted to copy. This is the target file. And then, so I need to specify the container and then the destination, like. So where I wanted to copy this file, I want to copy this file into this particular container, like Nginx container. Okay. And then the destination is something like this. So again, like I need to copy, I want to copy to this location. No. Yeah. So this is now copied. So I'll see like whether I'm able to see this particular container, docker exec minus it slash bin slash bash. I'm inside this container, so I'll go to this particular folder. So cd ls. So you can see aa.html. So this is actually copied, right? So what is the content that is present in aa.html? We'll see that content. Docker ps. This is the port, right? Slash aa.html. Okay, so this is the content which is present in my aa.html. So the one which I copied to this location. Okay, so it got copied, like, so this is the command docker cp, and this is the file on the host machine. And where exactly I'm copying it to this particular container. And in this container, where exactly I'm copying it to this location, user share Nginx HTML. Okay. So now let me actually change this particular HTML file on my host machine. So I wanted to add like 6. So now let me refresh this page. And do you think like it gets reflected here?
No.
Yeah, so it doesn't actually get reflected. That is because, so this is a separate copy. This is not like a volume binding, or you're not actually linking the host machine into the container here. Like, so it is just like, so you copied this a.html, the old version of a.html into the container. So now the container will have the old version of the a.html. So again, like if I do this command, like if I execute this command, so again, if I execute this docker cp command, so then so now if I want to execute this command, and then so I'm just overwriting this file. Okay. So now if I refresh, so I'll see this latest changes. Okay. So this is the difference between like volume binding and then copy. So the same way, like if you want to copy a file from the container into your host machine, so you can use this command like, so docker cp, the container name, and then what is the file like you wanted to copy, and then where exactly like you wanted to store on your target machine, on your host machine. Okay. So these are the commands related to the copy. So now coming back to this command, like, so we are using it regularly, like docker exec. So yesterday, like Tarun was asking me this question, like Tarun Kamma. So what's the difference between like attach? So we discussed about Docker attach and then so Docker exec, right? So for example, like if I do Docker attach this particular command, so you're not seeing anything. Okay, so what is happening? So it is not displaying anything. But if I browse this particular page, it will show those logs. Yeah, so it is not taking me to the batch, to the bash command. So that is because like this is not the entry point. Like, so what we discussed, like with Docker attach, like what is the command like which is used in the starting. So the same command will be executed when we attach. But Docker exec, so you can actually get inside this container or execute like any other commands. Like, so let's see this host machine. So you can see like when I did like Docker attach, so I mean, this is not real time, but ideally, like it should show these logs in the real time environment. So only when I do something like this, enter or something like that, at that time only it is actually reflecting, but that shouldn't be the case. Some issue with the PowerShell or the communication. When I close that tab, like it is actually displaying all this. So with Docker attached, like another thing like which I wanted to show you is Docker run minus IT minus D and then Ubuntu. So the same command I'll run it. So Docker PS. So with Docker PS, now you can see that like I have two commands. Okay. So let me attach this particular container. Docker attach. So I'm attaching this container. So it is taking me inside this container, right? So now when I exit this particular container, so you can see, so this particular container, it gets filled automatically. Docker PS. So you can see like, so this container like 4D, A, B, C, it got killed. And the reason why like this happened is, so when we are doing attach, so it is actually executing this bash command. Like this is the primary process like which is running on the container, right? So when you did like an exit, so it is actually killing this primary process. When this primary process is actually killed, the container, it gets killed automatically. But whereas with when you do like Docker exec, so Docker exec minus IT and then slash bin slash bash. Okay. So in this case, like even though I exit from this container, okay, so I'll show one more. So this B7, this is still the primary process is like bash. Okay. So on top of it, like what I did, so I'm just executing this additional command like bin bash. Like this is like a secondary process or something like that. Okay. So now when I exit out of this container, so it doesn't have like any impact. So this doesn't actually kill this container. So it is still in the running state. That is because the secondary process, it got killed, but not the primary one. Okay. So any questions with this? So any questions till this point? No. So this is a command like rename command. This is to rename a running container. Docker PS. So now if I wanted to rename this particular focused moser, so I can actually issue this command docker rename. So docker rename old name and the new name. So old name is focused moser. So I want to change that to common. So it got changed. Okay. And docker commit container and then docker commit. So we'll see this. So just keep a note of these images. Okay. I'll take a, I'll take a snapshot. So you can see like I have one Ubuntu container, right? So what I'll actually do is, so I'll also see like what are all the running containers. Docker, yes. So this is the Ubuntu running container, right? B7. So I'll get inside this container, docker exec minus it, and then the container name /bin/bash. So I wanted to, I'll create a folder here, like I'll create a folder like mkdir Pavan. Okay, I'll do ls. So you'll see, you see this is the folder name. So ideally, like with Docker, what the one observation what we did is like, so if I stop this container and if I start a fresh instance of this Ubuntu, so can I see this folder Pavan inside this new container?
No.
No, Pavan.
So it is not actually possible because like they all run independently, right? So, but I wanted to, so I made some changes inside this container. So also like I'll install something like this apt GitHub. Okay. I'll install Nano, few softwares like which I wanted to. It will be the amount of. Yeah. So meanwhile, like any questions? So I'll also install it. Apt get install nano. So I created a folder inside this container and then I added a software called as Nano, right? So now I'll be able to do like a so I created a folder and then I created a file. So let's assume that like I made good number of changes inside this container. Okay. But I wanted to persist these changes. Like, so I wanted to make sure that like, so whenever like the next time I run this content, run an image, so I want all these changes to be present. Okay. So for that, like what we can actually do is, so this is a container. So inside this container, I made all those changes, right? So for that, like this is a command, like so docker commit. So you are creating a new image out of this existing image, like okay, docker commit this one. Docker commit. Let's see the help. So docker commit, and then the container name. So and then I wanted to name this as like Ubuntu underscore with nano underscore Pavan or some random name 1.0. This is the tag. Okay. So it got created, right? Let me see these images, Docker images. So now if you see, so a new image it got created like Ubuntu with nano Pavan, and this is the tag name which I gave. Okay. So when it got created, like it got created 6 seconds ago. So if you compare this particular Ubuntu image and then this one, you see this is just like 77 MB and this is almost like 112 MB. So that is because like we did like update and then we installed few softwares and all those things, right? So the container size like it increased, the image size like it got increased. So now if I run a container out of this particular thing, so Docker run minus IT, Docker run minus T minus T, and then this is the image like which I'm running. Okay. So previously, like when I didn't actually give the tag name, so since I gave like 1.0 as the tag name, so I need to explicitly specify the tag name, or else like by default it takes latest as a tag name. So in that case, like it is not required to provide the tag name. Okay, so now coming back to this thing like Docker PS. So this is my container, right? Now if I get inside this container, -it, and then slash bin slash bash. So you can actually see this is the text file which I created, and also this is the folder which I created. So these changes like uh, these changes like initially I made inside this container. So and I created a new image out of this particular running container. So and from that image like I'm running again like a new container. Okay. And in this container, these changes are persistent. So that is the main advantage with Docker commit. So you can actually push this particular image to Docker registry, and tomorrow, like we'll see that, like okay. So tomorrow, like in the first half, like we'll actually complete this, and then we'll start with Docker file. So any questions on this? So we'll wrap it for today. Like I'll give like another 10 minutes for the questions and any discussions. So any questions with any of these commands? Like we completed running a new container, managing the container. We saw many things like so exposing a port and mounting your volume. So many things. These are so this port exposing and then volume exposing, volume binding. These are some of those important commands. Like
So is there any specific use case for using the copy command over volume mounting?
so if it is like so if it is like a single time usage, so you can actually go with this copy command. Like it is not actually required to mount your volume. And also another thing is something like this. So let's say like you have a container which is running on your AWS. So let's assume that like you have a production instance of this container running. Okay. So which is running on the AWS or Azure. Okay. In that case, like you cannot actually mount your this thing like so your host machine. So host machine volume onto that particular container which is running on AWS. So that is because like this is not your host machine in that scenario.
Yes.
So the virtual machine is actually the host machine, and inside that virtual machine, you are running this Docker container. So there is a virtual machine in AWS, which is the host machine, and in that virtual machine, you are running the container. But So if you want to copy a file from your laptop onto that particular container, so that is where like this actually comes in handy. Like, okay.
And when I mean, in Equifax, we have been using Docker files to actually configure our CI/CD development, deployments, and integration. So during the CI, the CI pipeline, do we actually use this copy command?
So ideally, like what happens with this CI CD commands is, so usually like, so you're using like GitHub Actions or Bitbucket, like which one you're actually using, or Jenkins itself?
Jenkins.
So on Jenkins itself, right? So usually they do like, I'm not really sure about like Jenkins, like how it actually behaves, but I have some experience with Bitbucket Actions or GitHub Actions, okay, Bitbucket pipelines. So in that case, what actually happens is, so it actually downloads the code like from the GitHub, like it actually downloads the code, and then it will put it on a local folder, okay, where the container is actually running, and then it mounts that particular volume. So maybe in the case
Yeah,
of Jenkins, so you're actually copying. It might
we are
it might actually copy.
actually
Yeah, for
I'm
that extension, yeah, Deepak, sorry, Deep Kiran, for that extension, we are using SCP command, secure copy.
Okay, yeah, secure
That
copy
command
you are
we are
using.
yes,
Okay.
SCP command. For that, before we need to establish connection between two servers, SSH command, SSH copy, open SSH, password SSH need to be established before
Configured.
doing this
Yeah.
SCP. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like in the case of Jenkins and in that scenario, like you're actually copying the code.
Correct.
Like,
Correct.
since this is
Correct.
like a one-time activity, so getting the code from the GitHub, like, and then so you can just copy the code to the container.
Yeah, so as we were going through this session, I just opened one of the project or one of the repository in my Equifax network, and there's a Docker file, right? So I just opened it, and I saw that because like after building our project, right, there is a bundle, right? Okay, so that bundle, we are providing the path of that bundle and then actually copying it to the Nginx path.
Nginx path.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
I do. Yeah, so we'll see more about these copy commands, and then so this is the copy with this particular shell, I mean command line tool, but we can actually copy the code and then add any of these files from the internet using add command,
Yeah.
and all that we can actually see in the Docker file. Okay, so I have another cheat sheet for Docker file also.
Pavan?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the cheat sheet for Docker file. So I'll share it when we actually start the Docker file. Yeah, so other questions? Yeah, someone is asking.
Hello, Pavan.
Yeah.
So similar kind we used while integrating Jenkins with Windows, Robocopy and Terracopy, right?
Hmm.
So earlier we have a discussion, right? Whether how to one of the team members like Surya mentioned SCP, right? So at the similar way we used Robocopy.
Terracopy and Robocopy.
Yeah,
Like so,
yeah.
these are like Windows specific, I believe, like Terracopy and then Robocopy. So
Yes.
they copy the content very fast, like, and this is pretty popular in the Windows world, like Robocopy and Terracopy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is advantage with like copy command. Like, so not all the time like we can actually mount a volume. So the volume mounting, it comes handy when we are actually doing the local development. Okay. So in that case, like, so you'll actually make changes to the source code on a regular basis, right? So each and every time, like, we cannot actually copy. But in case of deployments, like, it is just like getting the code once and then copying it. It is just like a one-time activity.
Yeah. It's good that now everything is making sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So any other questions regarding the ports? And so Sandhya, like, I think like I covered your question, right? So capital P.
Yes, Anna.
Okay. So let me know if you have any questions. So we'll cover it like another 3 minutes. If no questions, then we can wrap it up.
Yeah. A really awesome session, Pavan.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining. Only when
Yeah.
I have the right audience, and then I mean, so if everyone is actually interacting, so it will be more nice.
That's
like,
better. Yes, correct,
Yeah.
correct.
So I don't want these sessions to be like a one-man show. So if that is the case, like you can actually get like more sessions like on the YouTube itself, like, all right. So there are experienced trainers in YouTube like who deliver these sessions very beautiful. But I want this to be like interactive, and then I want this to be related to our projects. Like so wherever like you are using them in the projects, or even like we are giving like good amount of time for practice, right? So when we practice, like we get like more questions. So for example, like this minus P, capital P option. So I'm not aware of this minus P option. Like, so Sanjay was asking me about this thing, and then so that is when like I realized like, okay, there is something called as minus P, which actually randomly binds support. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then
Thank
we
you.
can wrap
Thank
the
you.
session. Like, thank you guys. Thanks for joining. Like, so you practice for at least like half an hour, so that like you'll get a good understanding. Like, so if you just listen, like it doesn't make sense. Like, so even like I did the same thing like initially when I started with the Docker. So initially, like when we listen, everything seems to be in place. Like, so okay, so this is simple. This is simple. Like, so but once we start practicing it, like that is when like we come across these questions or issues. Okay. Thank you guys then. Bye.
Bye.
Have a
Thank you
nice
very
day.
much.
Thank you, Tim. Bye.
Bye, sir.